YouTube's algorithm has become a sewer, discharging a certain quality of content like sludge, sticky, ever-flowing, inescapable. At face value, what some have deemed to be slop appears to have taken on a life of its own as a distinctive genre. However, such content has proven difficult to define judiciously. Perhaps instead of outlining its core characteristics, slop is more aptly understood as a mode of production, resulting in a palpable indifference noticeable within any genre, whether that be gaming, commentary, vlogging, reaction, video essays, or analysis. Regardless of the subject matter, what unifies slop under one umbrella is the content's purpose, not to be watched so much as absorbed. This media only intends to provide a passive viewing experience, and those who create it make this very evident in not so subtle terms, by explicitly imploring the audience to refrain from consuming their content critically. In most commentary videos about this, the desire to dissect slop lies less in an interest in the content in and of itself, and more in the dynamics that led to its prevalence. Further assessment yields a disquieting revelation that the age of slop was established less by algorithms appealing to the lowest common denominator, and more so by a widespread shift toward ambient media. By understanding this form of content as more of a condition than a genre, we can examine the symptoms of a discontented society driven by a relentless need for stimulation. A culture so married to consumption takes on the subsequent burden of insatiability. By constantly trying to outpace boredom with endless entertainment and needless convenience, we have sacrificed the mental equilibrium necessary for meaningful engagement. So, slop presents itself as a sustainable, profitable solution to the growing discomfort with silent moments. The term slop content first gained traction through internet commentators who traces the genre's emergence from the ashes of YouTube's golden age. Find slop as content that is mass-produced, derivative, low effort, and algorithmically optimized to be played in the background. It is content with no real beginning or end, made not to be understood but consumed, often recycled from other platforms created by AI or looped endlessly. Think Mr. Beast's reaction clips rebranded to 24/7 live streams, podcasts chopped up into microdoses, or YouTube shorts spliced into longer formats for additional monetization. What makes slop so insidious is that its quality and purpose allows it to occupy your senses without requiring your attention, so it just fades into the background. It has roots in passive media consumption, but it has evolved to something more ambient than passive. While passive viewing implies zoning out to something you're at least partially watching or listening to, ambient content works to disappear, to be seen without being noticed, heard without being listened to. It's not just that we aren't paying attention, it's that the content itself refuses to demand focus. This shift towards ambient content is not unique to YouTube. Brian Eno coined the term ambient music to describe sound that could accommodate many levels of listening attention without enforcing one in particular. Today we're seeing a similar ethos applied to videos. Media that is ever present but never imposing, engineered not for engagement but for endurance. YouTube's autoplay function, algorithmic recommendation system, and the rise of watch hour monetization have all contributed to this trend. Even further than that, users become most attached to platforms that curate content and alleviate us from as much deliberate input as possible. The landscape of modern day media consumption proves opportune for slop since it effortlessly seeps into and thrives in the infinite scroll. Slop asks nothing of us, and in return it gives us the comforting illusion of stimulation. Watching slop is like eating corn syrup, momentarily sweet, but ultimately hollow. Streaming platforms like Netflix and Amazon Prime have embraced this principle as well, intentionally crafting shows that can be watched without really being watched. As media scholar Amanda Lotz notes in Now We Disrupt This Broadcast, modern platforms are incentivized to produce content that is second screen friendly. These are narratives designed to keep viewers engaged just enough to avoid turning off the app, even if that means sacrificing narrative complexity. This has led to what Lotz and several others describe as ambient television, programming that demands minimum cognitive investment and can be absorbed while multitasking. Shows like Emily in Paris, The Witcher, and countless reality dating series exemplify this shift. They are easily digestible, low-stakes content tailored for divided attention. By this analysis, it becomes clear that the era of slop is a misnomer. It is more accurately described as an era of ambience. As our attention is further dispersed and constant access to stimulation results in habituation, it becomes increasingly necessary for content to survive in the absence of our awareness instead of rewarding our concentration. How ambient content conditions us is concerning though. The media has a design that reduces the friction of critical engagement, leaving viewers susceptible to accepting information at face value with little consideration of factuality. Repetition without reflection becomes the default mode. We begin to absorb misinformation passively, letting it slip through the cracks of low-effort, endlessly streaming content. As media theorist Neil Postman once warned, the danger is not that we are being misinformed, but that we are being disinformed, fed a diet of shallow content that mimics knowledge without demanding thought. This erosion of engagement leads to cognitive and cultural consequences. Attention spans shrink, emotional responsiveness dulls, the psychological space needed for boredom, which is often a precursor to creativity, gets drowned out by background noise. Over time, we become accustomed to lowbrow modes of presentation, shrill, repetitive, surface level. The drive to analyze or question diminishes, and so does our capacity for nuance. Eventually, we stop expecting media to challenge us or to even interest us. The bar sinks lower and lower, and our expectations follows. It's not just the death of analysis, it's the death of discernment. This passivity also contributes to a broader cultural phenomenon, the rise of anti-intellectual consumption. When media is designed to be easily digestible and emotionally unchallenging, audiences become accustomed to simplified narratives and superficial takes. Complexity is no longer a virtue, it's a burden, maybe even a threat. The demise of the nuanced critique follows naturally. Sophisticated arguments require time, discomfort, and reflection. Ambient content, by its very nature, discourages all three. Instead of meeting ideas on our own terms, we skim them like captions, emotionally react, and move on. In this environment, intellectual laziness perseveres. At times, it even becomes encouraged. In many ways, the shift towards ambient content represents a subtle restructuring of how we will proceed to interact with information. As such, slop content is symptomatic of a culture that increasingly values ease over depth and volume over value. And as the line between watching and absorbing continues to blur, we risk becoming fluent in content, but illiterate to its meaning. Though slop is empty, it is not necessarily devoid of all utility. For many viewers, it offers something more than content. It offers company. These videos, with their cluttered thumbnails, recycled memes, and endless autoplay loops, become the soft hum of a world that never stops talking. They fill the silence. They stimulate presence. And in a time of widespread seclusion and fractured community, that noise can feel like a lifeline. We are living in what the US Surgeon General has formally recognized as an epidemic of loneliness. In a 2003 advisory, Dr. Vivek Murthy declared social isolation as a public health crisis, linking it to the increased risk of heart disease, stroke, dementia, depression, and anxiety. The report emphasized that nearly half of US adults report experiencing measurable levels of loneliness, with young people being disproportionately affected. Even as we spend more time online, that connectivity often fails to translate into meaningful connection. In this context, slop content serves a psychological function. It becomes a kind of digital supplement for companionship, a comforting murmur in the background of daily life. You're not watching to learn or engage, you're watching so the silence doesn't consume you. It's a substitute for presence, a way to feel less alone without actually connecting to anything real. A clear example of this can be found in the rise of mukbang videos, long-form recordings of hosts eating large quantities of food while talking into the camera, sometimes for hours. Originating in South Korea, mukbang gained popularity globally as a form of parasocial intimacy, particularly for people who live alone or experience social disconnection. Researchers have noted that viewers often use mukbang to stimulate the experience of shared meals, a deeply social ritual that many people no longer have regular access to. It's not the food that matters, it's the company. The sounds of chewing, chatting, and the clink of utensils is all a form of social white noise, soothing in its mundanity. This ties closely to the broader trends in mental health. As anxiety, depression, and attention fatigue rise, people turn to content that adds less of them. Slop doesn't challenge, it doesn't provoke. It gives you something to look at, something to hear, something to not be alone with. It's a coping mechanism, a form of low-stakes self-soothing. But it can also be numbing. What begins as comfort can easily become avoidance, and what once masked loneliness may end up deepening it. Platforms aren't neutral in this exchange. They capitalize on emotional vulnerability, feeding viewers the kind of content that encourages passive endurance over active choice. The algorithm learns that you're tired, anxious, overstimulated, and it answers not with solace or beauty, but with more noise. In this way, Slop becomes both a symptom and a perpetrator of a broader cultural malaise. However, sometimes discomfort in the absence of stimulation is produced by habits instead of external circumstances. As we have advanced technology to quell every needless demand for convenience, especially in the realm of entertainment, people have grown more accustomed to a state of being where stimulation is ever accessible and therefore ever present. Because discipline is only a virtue for the sake of making money in our society, and money is a means to put oneself in proximity to consumption, we tend to indulge, not moderate. When we succumb to the conditioning of our culture without introspection, this often results in a lack of self-awareness, and in turn, a lack of self-restraint. When we fail to acknowledge that not only our actions but our thoughts as behaviors, we are put at the mercy of our nagging desires and our itching tendencies. Rarely do we see our predispositions or even our habits as aspects of our being that we can control. Because of this, we accept them as a staple part of our existence. And when others take notice, we tend to opt for verbal brush-offs with phrases like, "This is just how I deal with things," or "I do this to reduce my anxiety," the latter only referring to unhealthy coping habits, of course. However, by framing one's habits as something that is fixed within them and may never change, it leaves little room for growth. In turn, there is little room to improve one's circumstances and overall quality of life. Devices and digital platforms fight hard for our attention. Right now, it is one of the most lucrative resources available. Being as that is, it makes sense that they seek to supply us with constant distractions to help dispel mundane but manageable discomforts. And at first, this works with many of us. We find our niche online and we latch onto it. Over time, we develop a comfort that becomes a need, which often results in anxiety in the absence of media consumption. As a result, we demand more content that is made faster. To keep their users satiated, social media platforms incentivize rapid and consistent production from creators, even if the quality notably decreases. This can be seen in the endless sea of drama recap videos that are for some reason 3 to 4 hours long. So what once provided meaningful comfort becomes an obligatory engagement to starve off a more troubling anxious state, when in actuality, an appropriate balance between silence and noise could have circumvented what is now, for many, a vicious cycle. Ironically enough, there exists a prevalent form of slop that attempts to place itself in opposition to such content. Drama recaps, reaction channels, and commentary videos often present themselves as critical observers of a digital wasteland, but many have become indistinguishable from the content they critique. In fact, they frequently participate in the same cycles of meaningless repetition, algorithm chasing, and aesthetic stagnation, only with a more sarcastic tone. Traditionally, commentary implies a form of critical analysis or interpretation, adding context, insight, or argument to a particular subject. By most definitions, commentary is a set of explanatory or critical notes on a text or event, but slop commentary often fails to meet this standard. Instead of interrogating a trend or unpacking a subject, these videos merely gesture at a critique while relying on the same viral clips, same drama cycles, and creator views. It's reaction without reflection, judgment without substance. Creators like Oompaville, for example, often package their content with an air of ironic detachment, reacting to absurd TikToks and bizarre internet stories with mock surprise or mild disgust. But beneath that tone is a product indistinguishable from what it mocks: low effort, churned out content engineered for passive viewing. Creators like this often admit they're not passionate about what they make, that they're just doing what works, what pays. This admission is often framed as honesty or even self-awareness, but more often than not, it functions as a shield, a way of disowning the content while still profiting from it. Irony becomes insulation, detachment becomes denial, and that detachment it's contagious. Audiences who are increasingly insecure about what their media consumption says about them begin to mirror the creator's cynicism as a kind of cultural camouflage. We've been conditioned to fear earnestness, to preemptively roll our eyes at our own interests, to signal we're in on the joke before anyone else can make it at our expense. When a creator treats their content like a joke, it gives viewers permission to do the same, to consume mindlessly, but pretend it's ironic. The result is a feedback loop of disavowal. Creators don't believe in what they make, and viewers pretend they don't care that they're watching it. This is the death of intention, not just in the sense of lazy production, but in the deeper sense of creative disconnection. When a creator no longer believes in or even respects the thing that they're making, the work becomes hollow. And when viewers no longer expect intention, we accept that most things are made to be scrolled past rather than remembered. We begin to internalize that hollowness as normal. In this way, the collapse of intention is both cause and effect. Slop content is created with minimal effort because minimal effort is what performs the best. The system rewards detachment, mass production, and stylistic mimicry over originality or risk. And creators, exhausted by the pace and shaped by the algorithm, stop asking what they want to say and instead ask what will keep people watching just long enough to get paid. What's lost is not just quality, but conviction. Not every piece of content needs to be profound, but it should, at the very least, want to be here. Too often, slop commentary doesn't. But something is shifting. A growing number of viewers and creators are starting to push back. Slop isn't just boring anymore, it's depressing. People are tired of being overstimulated but undernourished, tired of content that feels like ambient noise pumped through a speaker. After a decade of irony and detachment, the hunger for authenticity has finally returned. We have fully circled back to the same meaningless, capital-driven content that traditional television was once criticized for. In the early days of YouTube, creators rebelled against that machine, carving out weird, somewhat honest spaces on the internet. But now, YouTube looks more like traditional TV than ever, complete with manufactured personalities, content farms, ads and sponsorships, and algorithmically viable fillers. Creators who do not produce slop, who value research, storytelling, experimentation, or just giving a damn, often find themselves alienated on the platform. They can feel out of place in a system that punishes quality because it requires more time but rewards uniformity. And in a cultural climate increasingly hostile towards intellectualism, there's a growing anxiety around doing anything that might be considered trying too hard. This can create that same sense of displacement. If you're not making slop, are you even relevant? Are you simply missing out? The question isn't just about taste, it's about belonging in a digital ecosystem that's flattened by the algorithm's relentless hunger for sameness. If slop is the symptom of an exhausted culture, then the antidote isn't necessarily a total rejection of ambient content, but rather a recalibration of our relationship to it. Just as a healthy diet allows for occasional indulgence, a meaningful relationship with media can accommodate both depth and distraction. The problem isn't that people watch slop, it's that it too often becomes the default, the only thing we consume. Take book talk, for instance, not referring to the creators themselves, but the books they popularize. A lot of the books are slop. I'm thinking of authors like Colleen Hoover or Sarah J. Maas. Both authors assisted in shaping the modern day book market. However, their works, while enjoyable to some, are intentionally unchallenging and do nothing to promote sustainable change in the genres they respectively occupy. Nevertheless, books like this, as well as works that center smut, are incredibly popular. The popularity in and of itself is not problematic, at least not to me. The issue lies in the consumer's consumption habits. If this is all buyers are reading, which they often say that it is, they will become unable to engage with or maintain interest in books of different genres with more perplexing plot lines and from authors with more complex poetic writing styles. Increasingly though, audiences are recognizing the toll of passive overconsumption. The rise of mindfulness culture, digital detoxes, and media fasting suggest that people are seeking more intentional relationships with the content they engage with. For music, we already curate playlists to match our moods, lo-fi for focus, ambient jazz for calm, punk for rebellion, we light candles, put on a movie we know we won't finish, and call it ambience. But somewhere along the way, the screen became always on. The background became the foreground. As viewers become more aware of their mental health, time, and attention spans, there's a growing desire for media consumption that reflects those values. This doesn't mean abandoning entertainment, nor does it mean intellectual elitism. It means recognizing that diversity in content requires diversity in consumption. The same viewer who enjoys a chaotic TikTok reaction might also want a documentary that challenges them, a video essay that makes them think, or a film that lingers in silence and ends with ambiguity. The solution isn't puritanical, it's pluralistic. It means asking, why am I watching this? What is it doing to me? What do I want from this experience? The healthiest future for digital media won't come from rejecting slop outright, but from resisting its monopoly on our attention. But going beyond the screen for just a moment, diversity in consumption is a concept that should apply to various forms and experiences. While we often think of the internet as the pinnacle venue for all human input and creativity, it is necessary to acknowledge that there is a world of content out there that prefers more intimate spaces, sometimes in more traditional mediums. Zines, live performances, and local film festivals still exist. However, when making an active choice to step outside the comfort zone of digital convenience and curated content, it's imperative to keep an open mind. Sometimes our favorite content comes from a place of initial resistance. At first, we may not fully understand how to engage with something that subverts our understanding of media production. For instance, a movie might seem directionless and dull before we accept that its intent is not to tell a story through orthodox, approachable means. It took me a long time to get through the original Shining movie. When we come to appreciate diversity not only in art forms, but also in the varied intentions of artists, a new world of creativity becomes available to us. Too often, we seem to believe appreciating art is a selfish act that must adhere to our sensibilities to be valid. In actuality, engaging in art should be an opportunity to step outside of oneself. When we are willing to set aside our expectations and step outside of our comfort zones, it can feel like a burden. However, it is a necessary price to find something new, real, and passionate in a world that rewards mediocrity. As we trudge through the slop era, reflecting on how the state of our culture has come to transform entertainment as well as individual habits, we should not move forward with dejection. Our discontentment comes from a longing for meaning, which means that all is not lost. What is most important at this moment is recognizing that we have all become too jaded and comfortable to do what is necessary to reduce the excess of low-effort content. Of course, there is no need to do away with it entirely or wane to a new extreme by choosing an exclusive diet of highbrow media. Instead, we need to appreciate the state of the world, and the conveniences we take for granted need to be balanced with intention. By understanding that we hold the power to create and uplift the work we find valuable, we can appreciate the impact of our deliberate input. What I would implore is a shift away from complaining about slop in favor of appreciation for those who make something we find meaningful. The act of creating authentically takes a lot of courage to overcome the self-doubt involved in revealing a piece of yourself to the world. If you yourself are a creative, push your work into the ether because it's worth something to you. Don't despair because the process is uncertain. If you make work you truly love and believe in, and you love the process as much as the results, your work will certainly shine through despite how much algorithms can crush genuine originality. By having the bravery to care and openly show it, by having the mindfulness to change our habits, the intentionality to diversify our consumption, we can influence our culture in a meaningful way and turn the era of slop into a period of unprecedented quality.